Hello, welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Matthew Lucas.
And I'm Stephen Ryan.
You are indeed. It is a brisk morning here in Mount Macedon. Stephen, we post every week, so if you want to follow our continuing horticultural adventures, do hit subscribe, hit the like button if you like this, and the notification bell, and you'll hear about our continuing adventures as they happen. What could that adventure be today, Stephen?
Well, today we're going to continue on with some work we've been doing throughout the year, looking at the successional plantings I've used in one of my particular borders. So that's today's.
It is the border that is right behind us. And in fact, the plant we began with, we're ending with because it is just making its
self-felt.
It's self-felt.
Yeah.
Well, look, without any further ado, let's have a closer look at the ferula and then just look at this border through the seasons in each of the story that we've made over the last 12 months. Let's go.
What a good idea.
Firstly, the colour. It's extraordinary lime green.
It's a beautiful plant. Now, Ferula communis is commonly known as giant fennel. It is not that closely related
Is that
to
because
fennel.
it's big?
Well, the giant bit, yes. It doesn't have the smell to the foliage that you would get from fennel. It has no aniseedy smell. To my knowledge, it's not edible.
Right. So it's not a herb.
So it's not a herb. But it is a fantastic garden plant.
It certainly is.
Its foliage is fine and lacy, and it comes up in winter. So in midwinter, you've got this amazing eruption of foliage. Later in the season, it will send up a 12-foot, so 4-metre-ish flower spike way up there, and it'll get whirls of yellow flowers on it, and the whole thing is really see-through, so you can have the plant towards the front of a border without completely hiding the rest of the border.
As yours is.
Yeah, as mine is, right near the driveway.
Yeah.
And it's a great insect attracting plant, so when it's actually in flower, the hoverflies and bees love it, so it's a very good plant from that perspective. But just the fact that you've got all this fabulous winter foliage, what more could you want? Not only a great plant for winter colour, fabulous spring and summer flower spikes, but also its uses through history makes me laugh. I think.
We are standing next to this, which is a hypericum, which we looked at in midsummer when it was doing its beautiful thing. So as we are now in early winter, it seems like a good time to step back in time and look at this hypericum in its full glory.
What a good idea. Well, Matthew, it's now summer and this border has changed again.
It really is amazing, I have to say, seeing the change of this border, and we're so lucky that we've got various stories from the year which we can show how it's changed, but also how you've had to consider what these different plants do at different times of year.
Exactly, it's like making a painting, but you're doing it all year round instead of the once.
And this catches my eye because I love this butter yellow.
Yes, well, this is one of my all-time favourite hypericums. It's a hybrid that was discovered in a garden in Ireland, and it's named after the garden. It's Hypericum roellin, and it is a fabulous shrub. It starts flowering about mid-spring. This will still have flowers if it doesn't get too dry, right through until the autumn.
Wow, very long flowering season, and it's the most beautiful butter yellow and really large flowers.
Yeah, hypericums do yellow and largish flowers quite well, so they are a great group of shrubs that are underrated here.
And then behind, is this a grass or a bamboo?
That's a variegated bamboo, so that's one of the slow-running bamboos, so it doesn't sort of take off, and it has very good variegated foliage. And as you walk along, you can see, we've mentioned this plant before, but here we have Geranium palmatum, which is one of the Macronesian geraniums that self-seeds itself all over the garden, and it's just reaching its sort of zenith. It's just starting to go over. So in the next week or two, I'll be starting to pull out the corpses.
As they say in the zombie apocalypse. All right, let's have a walk further along and see what else is down further that way.
Why not?
Stephen, what a difference a few months makes. Look at this ferula.
Ferula, yes. Ferula communis. It's now going over, but it's still structurally interesting, and it will stay there until the seed is completely ripe. I'll collect some seed to grow the next generation. But in the meantime, it's being slowly swamped over by the other biomass that's in the garden.
Now, when we did the story on this, it was literally just bare earth. It's amazing how lush and beautiful it is. So let's talk about some high points. I think the thing I notice most is the colour and form of the leaf of this shrub, small tree?
Small tree.
Large shrub, small tree.
Yes. It's Cercis canadensis Hearts of Gold, which in Australia is a comparatively new cultivar. I know it's been overseas for a lot longer than we've had it here, but I'm really taken with it. The commoner one was one that came out here many years ago that is a dark burgundy one, which was called Forest Pansy. And most Australian gardeners, at least in southern Australia, are familiar with Forest Pansy.
You see that, because the leaf is a stunning colour.
Beautiful colour. But I have to say, I'm becoming more and more enamoured with Hearts of Gold.
Enamoured of Hearts of Gold. Oh, yes. You're a poet.
Yeah, and it's a lovely little tree, soft goldy green foliage, very elegant habit, and it will probably eventually get up to around about 4 metres.
Okay, so not huge, but it's a beautiful soft green. So the other thing that hasn't happened yet is that the Clematis has taken off, but it's not started to bloom. So you did mention that when we were talking about the ferula in late winter.
Yes.
When is that going to come into its full glory?
It probably would have done so already, apart from the fact that we've had a very cool summer. So it will come into bloom round about sort of mid to late summer, I think. It's already starting to produce buds in it if I look really closely. So even over the next few weeks, if it warms up a little bit, it'll start to flower. So I'll have this carpet of comparatively small, soft, almost white blue. It's just that very faintest shade of blue, which will look fantastic against the cercis. It'll look great against the yellow canes of my giant bamboo, and there'll be this little splash of blue with one of the salvias in flower in amongst it all.
We will, and we also did a story on the bamboo, so we'll link all of those below. Well, it's wonderful to see the border in this cycle of its growth.
In the next phase, in fact.
The next phase. So we'll come back and revisit it when the Clematis is in bloom.
What a good idea.
So Stephen, this border is sort of by your drive. It's one of the first things that people see as they come in.
Exactly.
What was your philosophy about it then when you began?
When I began?
30 years ago?
Yes, a very long time ago. All right. There's a couple of philosophical things about borders that you pass all day, every day.
Yes.
One is that I like to have change throughout the season. So it needs to have successional planting, not something static that looks the same the whole time. So it needed to be a complex planting because you can't have just one or two varieties of plants.
Did you actually sit down with a piece of paper and have things that flower in spring and draw them out, and things that flower in summer? And did you plan it like that, or was it more organic?
No, grew like topsy. I sort of had a vague idea of the colour palette I was going to use. Which is basically yellow, blue and purple, and you just happened to be appropriately dressed. I wanted also diversity in textures and forms, so I needed different leaf shapes, different leaf colours that would blend into the theme. And then it was a matter of selecting plants that were going to hopefully give me interest at different times of the year to engage me as I came in. So they're the three basic principles.
Right, so those three themes were successional sort of activity, planting, leaf texture, shape, form, colour, and then what was the third thing?
Colour palette.
Colour palette, that's right. Yellow, how could I forget?
That.
So I'm just curious again, when this was basically sort of like bare land, wasn't it?
It was definitely.
A rough paddock. So when you had created the soil and tilled the earth, it was all rich and lovely, did you plant a whole lot of things in one go, or did you plant the odd thing? I'm just curious about, and for gardeners watching, how you kind of contemplate a big theme and then how you actually put it into practice.
Well, in fact, I did do a little bit of fairly quick planting because we all want something straight away. That's part of what it is. So I selected plants that I knew would give me different flower colours in the colour palette I wanted, and I placed them out. But that doesn't mean that all those plants are still in the same spot to this day.
You have more shade.
You refine your borders as you go along. So nothing is ever static in gardening. So quite a number of the plants I put into this border are probably long gone, and I've forgotten what they were by now. So, every so often I'll see a gap in the border and feel the need to fill it with something, and then I'll start looking. Or conversely, I'll have something really special that I've grown from a cutting or got from a friend that I want to fit in the border. So I might well bring something home spontaneously and see if I can manage it into the border. So it can come from either direction as far as my garden is concerned. Other people work in different ways, of course.
Now we're standing in front of something else which is looking a little sad.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, this is the Buddleja lindleyana, which has the wonderful purple flowers that hang down in summer.
Which is stunning. Now, that was another story that we did back in time, a few weeks after the Hypericum story. So let's step back in time and see what this looked like in its full glory.
What a good idea.
Midsummer, the border is looking amazing, and this caught my eye.
Yes.
Tell us exactly what this is.
All right.
Doing its dangly gorgeousness.
It is. It's a stunning Buddleja, and it's Buddleja lindleyana from Asia. It is again a suckering thug. I have a garden full of suckering thugs. So this suckers a fair bit, so one has to take that into consideration when you plant it. But it gets these fabulous pendulous spikes of purple flowers.
And that's what struck me, because it just didn't look like a Buddleja to me, because we're all familiar with the standard Buddleja, but
exactly.
the form of this is so elegant.
And this you can preen it if you want to, because you can just run your fingers down and take the dead flowers off. Just a little aside, if you've got a film crew in the garden and you want it to look at its very best, you can actually preen the flowers on this. So Buddleja lindleyana, you don't prune it like you would a normal Buddleja. I just go through and remove very old redundant branches. Otherwise I leave it much to its own accord.
Now, talking of suckering thugs, it's quite a thicket, but you can control that, I guess, through pruning.
You can to a large extent, but you do need to allow it some space, because I mean, if you ended up with 3 stems was all you had in your clump,
there's no point.
Yeah, not going to make the impact. The flowers are all on the ends of the branches, so you need a lot of flowers to make it worthwhile. So
it is stunning.
It's a lovely, lovely plant, and it gives me summer right through into mid to even late autumn flowers. So it has a long flowering period. It just keeps giving over that period.
And a beautiful purple colour, which sort of echoes a lot of the other colours going on in the border throughout the year. Now then, you mentioned it's from Asia. Whereabouts, what's its hardiness?
I'd say it's pretty hardy in most climatic zones, other than the really, really torridly cold or the steamy
torridly hot
or the torridly hot, yes, the really steamy jungly places. So it will grow in a wide range of climates, and in some of them far too well. So there you go. But it's a very elegant and beautiful plant, and it just goes to show that you don't want to actually, sort of tar a genus with a certain brush. You know?
And you're hot to trot on that, because a lot of things we've covered are the more unusual forms of a common type that everyone goes, oh, I know what copper beaches or whatever.
Yes, daphnes all look like that.
They do.
And they don't. So there you go.
Well, there's something else we're going to look at that's doing its thing at this time of year in this border. So let's go and have a look at that.
What a good idea.
That is amazing, because Buddlejas, well, he just looks so un-Buddleja-like. It's so elegant. It looks much more tropical.
Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful shrub, and apart from its suckering habit, is well worth finding room in most gardens.
We've established that you've got a soft spot for suckering thugs.
Yeah, I do. I love a plant that has a zest for life, and I'm perfectly happy to manage them.
Talking of zest for life, talking for management, it is now early winter. And what do you have to do, given that this is so prolific, what do you have to do to manage this plant?
All right, well, because it's summer flowering, I tend to prune this one in the winter months, so now is a good time to prune them. And what I look for is to leave some of the stronger canes that it has produced this year and take out the older, twiggier wood that has flowered madly. So by the time the finished thing will be just these big, long, coppery canes that'll just be standing up all over the place.
Well, we'll have a closer look and you can show us exactly what you do.
All right, what a good idea. Now for some proper work when it comes to pruning. Good pair of secateurs, and you look into the plant and you will see quite obviously the younger shoots of these lovely sort of coppery coloured ones. They're the ones that I'm going to be leaving in. The ones I'm going to be removing are those that have got this paler coloured bark on them and are very twiggy and have quite obviously lost their strength. So all that wood needs to come out of the Buddleja. So you just bring it right back to there so that you pull all of that out, and what you're left with is these lovely canes here. So you can go through the whole plant and do exactly the same thing, removing these long spent canes. So as you can see, this is one of the old canes, and there's nothing worth keeping on the top. So we take that right out of there. Oops, and leave the other ones. And then you've got to gently pull them out so that you don't break off the good canes. And there we go, we're starting to open up the plant now. All right, once we finish the pruning, we're going to end up with all of these long arching canes, which will make the whole plant look rather thin and a bit miffy at this stage of the year. But come spring, it will shoot out madly all over the place. It'll start flowering from the tips of these canes, and you'll have all the new canes coming up. So what you're doing is you're recycling your wood every year.
Well, that Buddleja is looking scrappy and somewhat unattractive now, Stephen.
Yes, but give it time. It'll look gorgeous in the summer.
It's all about the cycle of life of this border.
Exactly.
Which brings me to an interesting question. The
Yes.
cycle of life.
Yes.
Nothing is static in the garden.
No.
What are your future plans for this border? How does it evolve and change over time?
All right. Well, you need your instant gratification, so I'm forever
Chocolate.
planting.
It's called chocolate.
Oh yeah, but you do need things that are in fact going to give quick fills and what have you. So sometimes they can be semi-temporary plants,
Which could be annuals as well.
It could be. I don't use a lot of annuals because I do tend to find there's a fair bit of work involved in that. But even short-lived perennials or self-seeders that will then sort of fill gaps of their own accord can be useful. But you've also got to look at the long term, how you anticipate the border evolving and changing, and therefore you need to have some things in your palette of plants that you're using that may not be making much impact for some time because they're comparatively slow, but in time will start to sort of show their presence, and so that you've got that sort of long-term aim involved.
And I think if we look behind us, as they say in pantomime, there is just such an example.
Well, there is. I've planted something that I might live long enough to see as a major specimen in my garden.
All right, we'll go and have a closer look.
What a good idea. This is an example of long-term thinking. This is Dacrydium beccarii from the mountains of New Guinea. I got this as a little tiny cutting that I struck myself from a friend's plant, and it's probably already about 6 to 8 years old. So it's going to be a long time before this makes any real impact in the border, but for me it has a lot going for it. It's got silver foliage which will work in the border, texturally interesting, and it's as rare as hen's teeth.
Well, Stephen, now we're squatting in the garden.
Yes, we certainly are.
Up to no good. But one of the major aspects of the seasonality of the garden was the Clematis.
Yes, the Clematis that is a ground cover variety, and at this time of the year its foliage all dies and looks scruffy, and so this is the time I have to get in and prune.
But before you do that, let's go and look at it at its heyday when it was doing the thing that you wanted it to do in this border.
Exactly. All right, now, earlier in the year, people saw this border, and it had
nothing, Stephen, nothing.
Well, it did have a big ferula in the middle of it, which has now disappeared.
Where's
underneath.
it gone?
Well, it's gone dormant, and I've cut the old dead flower stems off because they were starting to look scruffy. I left them there structurally for a while, and now the ground is completely covered with the ground cover Clematis that I've been using. Clematis Mrs. Robert Bryden. Now,
this is the only flower. I blame you that it's no longer in bloom.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, we were just a bit late getting into our filming schedule, and unfortunately it's gone over, but it's been in flower for several weeks, just passing now. We had a bit of rain the other day which knocked most of the rest of the petals off, but it's not altogether about its flowers. I mean, it's pretty, but it makes a great weed suppressant ground cover for later summer period. It will throw itself up through other plants at the same time, and its big coarse leaves I think are quite handsome.
I was going to say the leaf structure is really beautiful, and it does make, and you've got other little things popping through. It looks amazing. Now, the other thing that strikes me at this time of year is the bamboo. So have you lifted your bamboo, Stephen?
I have indeed. Only about a week or so ago I realised that the beautiful golden canes on my Philostachys vivax aureocalis weren't looking at their best because they were being hidden by foliage.
Yep.
So I've been in and done what seems to be turning out to be about a twice a year clean up of the skirt so that I can see the stems.
The beautiful combs,
yes,
which
the
I
combs.
learned from you. They do look amazing. So the border is looking fantastic. Didn't it look amazing? So much growth in one season. It's kind of incredible. So looking at it now, it all looks very dead. So what is the task that you have to do annually with this Clematis?
All right, I cut it right back to an original stump.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it will layer itself and start a new plant.
Oh, right.
So
I was going to say, find me the stump.
Yeah, well, the there's stumps in here, but there's lots of them through the border now. It started as one plant originally.
Yep.
I allowed it to layer so that it then took root and started a new plant.
Right.
And where that new plant was in a good spot, I left it there, and I now prune back to that.
Right.
If it was in the wrong spot, it got dug up and stuck in a pot and sold to someone else. So there you go.
The cycles of life and commerce.
Yes.
A quick question then about the layering. That obviously would have to happen in one season, the layering and the rooting.
It does tend to. I mean, the foliage lies along the ground, so the stems are in direct contact with the ground quite a lot. And so it's quite a common occurrence for it to layer down and create a new plant.
All right.
So that's what I do. So at this time of the year, have to prune it right back.
Well, I'm going to stand aside and we're going to watch your expert Clematis pruning.
All right. All right, so what you have to do is you find the stems and you follow them down until you come to where they've grown from the ground, and you will find some nice little dormant buds just above where I cut the previous year. So that's all you've got to do is find that and cut just above those buds, and you go through the whole bed and clean it out that way. So here we go. I found one here that's got some nice big fat buds. All I have to do is cut it off and throw it out of the border, and you can keep doing that until such time as you finish the whole plant.
Stephen, has everything been an unbridled success?
Of course not. Gardening doesn't work that way.
Oh.
So I have had a few disasters, and I can enumerate one or two for you if you would like.
Let's, in relation to this border, what perhaps hasn't worked then?
Well, I thought it was going to be a brilliant idea to have a miniature Japanese maple in this border.
Yep.
And I planted a small plant of a miniature Japanese maple. The Clematis immediately swamped it, so it didn't survive. I guess if I'd kept on top of the Clematis and all that sort of thing, but when you've got a largish garden, you can't be on top of everything.
Yeah.
And so my poor little miniature maple is
no
deceased.
more.
It is deceased. The other thing that I'm still not convinced won't work, but it hasn't worked so well this year. I planted some winter flowering Iris unguicularis, because I thought in the winter with the ferula and some lovely blue iris, it would all be nice when the Clematis was pruned back.
Yeah.
This year the iris, it did flower last year, but this year it's decided not to flower, and it could be that the Clematis again was too rough and ready for it. It could have been the cooler season, so I'll give it another year. If it manages to flower well for me next year, then I'll plant more. So the idea is to extend the range of the iris so that it gives me something in the winter months. But the jury's still out.
And if it doesn't, off with its head.
Well, it'll go somewhere else. I'll move it somewhere else.
And have you got in your mind something else that you might try instead of it?
No, not at this point in time, because it's got to be something that will cope with the hurly-burly of the Clematis during the summer, and then step up when it comes more into winter. And of course, I'd still like to keep it in the colour range that that I've sort of designated for this area. So maybe some of our viewers might have some ideas on what I could plant if Iris unguicularis doesn't work for me next year.
Message below.
Yes.
And the other thing that is giving you some colour right now is right behind you is an interesting salvia, which does look a little chlorotic and sick, but the flowers look great. Let's just have a quick look at that, because I'm intrigued.
Oh, all right, why not indeed. All right, this winter salvia is sort of working in the border. It's a bit rangy. I might have to do a little bit more pruning or shift it further forward where I can get a little more light on it. And it has a sort of a variegation to the leaf, but it seems to fade as the foliage gets older, so it's only the new leaves that seem to variegate, so it's a bit disappointing in the variegated stakes as well, I have to say. And dare I admit to this, I can't remember its name. It was given to me by one of the major salvia collectors here in the country. I must ask Meg again what it is, but maybe I'm just not engaged with it enough to bother. All right, now something that has succeeded in this border,
and everything has largely,
largely, but something that is doing its thing exactly as I hoped it would, is this gold-leafed Anthriscus sylvestris called golden fleece, which is a yellow-leafed version of the wild cow parsley of Europe. Gets little white flowers on the tops of the stems in the spring. Not really what I'm interested in. They're the wrong colour and they don't really, add to the borders particularly. But it's winter growing, so as the Clematis goes down and I prune it away, I've got this mat of golden foliage right through the winter months, and it is actually starting to self-seed itself. So my gut feeling is that I will end up with quite a nice drift of this particular plant. And I guess the only warning I would put out there to people, if you've got green cow parsley or you've got the burgundy leaf cow parsley in your garden, make sure you keep them all separated from each other because they will cross.
They'll have fun at night. But it does, I mean, it's winter now, it's cold and miserable, and this looks like beautiful fresh spring foliage, doesn't it?
Or chlorotic, depending on which way you look at it.
No, I have to say that salvia is chlorotic.
Yeah.
That is not a variegation, Stephen. That's just sick.
Yes, exactly. But there you go. So the gold-leafed cow parsley has been a winner.
A triumph.
Me. Yes, and I think I'll encourage some more.
Excellent. And so, Stephen, we're beginning where we end. We're ending where we're beginning with the ferula, which is just bursting into life.
It is fabulous. So by early winter, it's already making an impact. It will be here right through until its flowering period in the latest spring when it finishes.
So to see what this looks like in bloom, let's just quickly step back and have a little look at it.
What a good idea.
Stephen, what a difference a few months makes. Look at this ferula.
Ferula, yes.
Ferula.
Ferula communis. It's now going over, but it's still structurally interesting, and it will stay there until the seed is completely ripe. I'll collect some seed to grow the next generation.
And so here it is. It is winter, and like the cow parsley, it's giving you a really spring bright vibe, and it's the
fresh.
Beginning of winter when everything is usually looking quite sick, tired and dead.
I do love reverse perennials. It's what I call them. So things that grow through the winter and disappear in the summer. And I think they're great value.
You've got quite a few of those. In fact, you've got quite a few Chilean ones, which we're also collecting a whole series of stories about because they do amazing things in winter. Well, from your glorious border that we have seen throughout the season in highs and lows, in colour and dead.
Less.
What could we possibly do next week to top this, Stephen?
Oh, I don't know. We probably won't top it, but we'll do something else interesting and different. Why not?
We will. So if you want to find out what it is, do hit subscribe. We post every week, and we look forward to seeing you on our continuing journey. Until then, goodbye.
Yes, bye all.